All right, everyone, we're back. Hello, hello. Joined by our man in England, Fred. How's it going?
Hello, hello. It's fine. I've had a nice, relaxing Saturday,
That's
and
good. Mine is
yeah,
only halfway over, so such as time difference.
yes.
Fred was very kind to join us. This is something that this is a piece that I've been wanting to discuss ever since I read it. And I think it works on multiple levels. It works as a spooky season, almost Halloween post, as it has to do with demons. Insert Alex Jones voice here. Damn demons. And it also has to do with things like democracy and elections. And because in the US here we're entering into the most important election of our lifetime. How many times I got to hear that?
Demo the thing that jumped off, the thing that really struck a nerve with me so much was democracy as an incantation, which
Yep.
he distinguishes from democracy, which is just, me a particular mechanism of government, which
Yep.
doesn't have to have all this spiritual significance.
Well,
So
and
I found that I found that
let's tell
interesting.
our
Yeah.
yeah, let's tell our listeners what we're talking about. We're not talking about the whole Screwtape letters. That's a great
No.
book. Highly recommend it. We're talking about the thing that is usually put in at the end. At least in American editions, and I'm gonna guess British editions as well, which is Screwtape proposes a toast, which is a piece that Lewis wrote later, still in the same world of hell, the hell world, the literal hell world. But now instead of from Wormwood's perspective, it's from Screwtape's perspective. So you finally get to hear Screwtape talk, and he's giving a toast over a fine feast that the demons have been having on all sorts of horrible people and their various sins, which is also kind of funny in a dark way, darkly funny. Um, Lewis wrote
It's
this.
no, it's very funny. Yeah, it's very funny.
Lewis wrote this. Lewis himself says in one of the intros to this that he's writing about quote unquote England, but that the reader should be aware that he's really writing more about America. He wrote this for an American publication and wanted to not instantly sort of like turn his audience against him, and so he was chose to be self-deprecating,
I
which is probably the right decision. But he's really writing more about America in many respects than he is England. Although obviously, as we were saying before we started recording, the spirit of democracy, whatever spirit that really is, maybe there's multiple spirits of democracy, some good, some bad,
but
uh, flows in across the Anglosphere. So there's obviously a lot
but
of crossover, but yeah,
America was the exporter of
yes,
the spirit of democracy in this time of writing. Well, I this was written in the 50s, I think, isn't it? With 50,
I think
56,
it's in the
59,
late, what's it, 50? Yeah, late 50s, I want to say. That
late
sounds
late
right.
50s.
Yeah.
So I read so I'm reading this and I'm thinking, is this just so prophetic, or was there actually a lot of stuff happening in the 50s that people could read this and immediately see what is being referenced, as in that was a lot of stuff already happening then that people could recognize. So I'm because I don't know for sure, but obviously there is a lot of stuff in here that is resonating a lot with what's happening today in terms of uh just absolute thought conformity and you know political incantations
Incantations,
of
yeah.
yes, which there's a lot of that. But
Let's start with that.
was
Let's
was
start with
was
that.
was was it really just C.S. Lewis being so prophetic, or was it something that could be seen? I mean, there must have been lots of other stuff at the time. I mean, there was still the height of communism, and people did know what was happening in communist countries in the 50s. So and obviously there was a lot of incantation there. But yeah, I thought just before we sort of go into it, there's a little introduction, a descriptive introduction in brackets in my one, which I thought I'd just read. It's very short.
Okay.
It says, this scene is in hell at the annual dinner of the Tempter's Training College for Young Devils. The principal, Dr. Slubgob, has just proposed the health of the guests. Screwtape, a very experienced devil, who is the guest of honor, rises to reply. And that's it. So yes,
Yeah.
I just thought I'd put that in there.
Yeah, it's a good setup. Yeah. Um, obviously too, sorry if I can before this jump is jumping to mind. Really the actual screw tape letters themselves, and then this extra bit, screw tape proposes a toast, which I contend is almost as good as the other. Like it's shorter, but it's so, like you said, it so crystallizes it. Speaking of people getting trapped in,
Yes.
speaking of trapping people in crystals, it traps so many things in the crystal and keeps it there. It distills down a lot of the themes that is explored elsewhere in the work. Obviously, screw tape letters is more about a personal salvation story, something like that, and
Hmm.
a demon frustrated that it's not his plan's not working out, which is also very funny.
But
Um,
he,
but
I, yeah. So sorry, carry on.
yeah, but this I mean this is it's short and very sweet, or maybe not sweet. It's pretty nasty, but it's funny and it's very insightful. I do think that it's interesting in that you can see the influence Lewis had here on people like Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett
Sure.
with Good
Yeah.
Omens. Good Omens in particular, Good Omens. I mean I don't know if they ever claimed to have been influenced by this. I'm like, but come on, like Good Omens would
Of
not have been
course.
written without screw tape letters. Obviously
Of
they
course.
that's from a total I think you can enjoy that book. I do enjoy that book. I think you can enjoy it in a way that the authors didn't intend you to enjoy it, which is how I enjoy it. It is obviously more prog sort of shit lib assumptions, but still quite funny,
Yeah.
quite cheeky.
No,
Its
I
use
no.
of humor, diabolical humor, is very similar. Um, I'm thinking particularly of like the character Crowley. Like there's something of a screw tape in Crowley. There's something of a wormwood in Crowley. Like the and maybe that's just that it's English humor about demons.
Hmm.
Maybe that's the through line. Maybe it's just thematic. Maybe it's just under the surface. Maybe Pratchett and Gaiman weren't overtly influenced by Lewis. I don't know if they were or they were not, but I can't help but see a
Hmm.
connection just even thematically. Like this came first. And so I just point that
Yeah.
out. It's like a connection to
No,
another work. Also, I
from
recommend Good Omens. Honestly, again, if we can kill the author for 2 seconds, and sadly one of them is dead. I don't want, Pratchett was a good author. I think that Good Omens is a great and very fun book, and would be a fun if
hmm.
you're ever interested, Fred. I'm gonna throw it out there as a lure.
No,
It's
I
very
would.
funny.
I've not read any Neil Gaiman. And yeah, I do have this suspicion of what sort of worldview he's coming from, one that is more, shit lib. And I did watch some of the recent dramatization
Not very good. The
on
book's much better.
Amazon dramatization of Good Omens, and
The
I
book is
didn't
so
enjoy
much
it
better. The book is
because, well,
hilarious.
I was
Yeah,
expecting not really to enjoy it that much. I had
yeah.
it's
The
got
book makes you
fucking
laugh. Yeah.
it's got fucking Michael Sheen, David Tennant, God knows what else, and of
I
course
only like
what's
Michael Sheen if he is a werewolf in Underworld.
oh
Yeah.
oh you're not talking about Twilight, are
No, he was a vampire in
you?
Twilight. He's a lichen in
God. Yeah.
Lucian the lichen. Yeah, he's badass in Underworld.
Mm,
Anyhow,
yes. I mean,
um,
he's an awful person as well.
oh, is he?
Also,
Okay.
I mean, just politics and
Oh,
just
okay. Yeah,
being an
not
awful
surprising. Yeah,
stuck-up Welshman.
yeah.
Also, Neil Gaiman has been cancelled recently for sexual uh, impropriety allegations.
Huh. Well,
Yeah,
Screwtape
that
is happy
happened.
about that. So, well,
Which is why the latest series of Good Omens is going to be one episode, or rather, I suspect that they're doing that I think that might be something to do with it. But yeah, Neil Gaiman has been accused of something, and yes, it's a shame because obviously, I mean, films like Coraline and just in general, there'll be a lot of acclaim. I mean, he's written children's books, so
right. Yeah.
and when any sort of horror writer, particularly one that is writing horror in a very kind of immersive way, rather than writing horror for the sake of wanting to demonstrate horror in order to put people off to actually make people fear demons. Some horror writers are just so immersive and think it's so cool, and I think Gaiman is more like that.
Yeah.
And
You're thinking of
someone
Sandman. This Sandman, and I'm guessing like that's what you're really thinking of. Like
Sandman, sorry,
Sandman, the immersive world of the graphic novels.
I don't know enough
Okay,
about
that's
that, I'm
fine.
afraid.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean,
I'm just
he
sorry,
writes
sorry.
this.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm just that
Yeah,
yeah, there will be some horror writers or horror filmmakers or people that a heavy metal artist who will do that stuff to actually because they want to immerse themselves in such a world. Even though it's ironically a lot of it is influenced by people like Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne, people who were Christians, and a lot of them were doing it not to be immersive, but just to, demonstrate artistically that this stuff is real and
I gotta.
you shouldn't joke about it.
So yeah,
Yeah, there we go then.
I'm
I
wearing
mean,
my Rob Zombie t-shirt. So yeah, yeah.
as flawed as a person that Ozzy Osbourne is, he is said to be a practicing Anglican and he would pray a lot before gigs.
I like Ozzy.
Obviously he's an extremely flawed human being, extremely flawed. But no, he's not a devil worshipper
No,
and he's not, this, that, and the
neither
other.
is Rob Zombie. Neither is Rob Zombie. So yeah,
I
and neither
don't
is
I don't
and Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper is a Presbyterian.
Alice Cooper as well. Yes, I don't know enough about Rob Zombie.
Rob
I've
Zombie
not listened
is
to his
he
music that
is
much,
not
but
necessarily he's not Christian, but he is definitely
yeah,
he's not a devil worshipper. He's
yeah,
somebody. Rob Zombie comes from well, man, we got to get back on track, but I'll just say this: Rob Zombie is somebody who comes
yes,
from a circus family. So
okay,
he's a circus family, and so
sure.
he's there too, and he loves
More
horror movies, and that's kind of
more
his vibe.
more a kind of 19th century freak show sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean it's
Yeah,
yeah, it's yeah.
sure.
He
No, yeah,
is not he is not a true believer in that like Anton LaVey way. No, 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 no.
sure.
Yeah, yeah,
To
yeah.
to gradually bring us back on track. So yeah, Neil Gaiman is one of these more immersive horror people. Henceforth, him being accused of impropriety like this is more worrying rather than
Yeah.
incidentally, oh, I'm someone that does this and I've been, because I imagine he's probably a strange person with a strange love life, So yeah. Anyway,
I've heard some things
um,
about that. Yeah.
yes, and
Yes.
yeah, it's a shame. Anyway, Screwtape proposes a toast.
Yeah.
So
So he's
yes,
toasting. I mean, this is a demon,
mm,
talking about everything that's, again, we should not. I think we should find him funny. I don't think we should. I mean, and Lewis says you should not agree with him at all. And like Lewis also says at the
yeah,
beginning of, I think in the intro to Screwtape Letters, which is from Wormwood's perspective, another demon. Lewis is quick to say they are liars since they're demons. So not only should you not agree with them, you should also recognize that what they think, what the things that they're talking about might not actually be accurate. Like they may be
mm,
just lying to each other, or like because they serve the father of lies, they're completely non-reliable narrators. And like Lewis basically, at least in
sure,
edition, says that, like, just so you know, if they say like such and such a thing is how we catch people and send them to hell, maybe that is how they catch people and send them to hell, or maybe they're just liars, right? So it's like these
yeah,
are people. This is the nature of damnation, is
kind
to
of,
be so disconnected from the truth, which is Christ, that
yeah,
you
and
just it's like you're so you're they're internally twisted up to the infinite amount, right? Like so they don't like we should laugh at them. We should probably learn something from them, but we should not quote unquote
mm,
listen to them or take them seriously in the sense of obviously demons are a problem, but like they're not reliable narrators, right? They don't have a
yeah,
reliable sense of what is. And so so when we discuss, I guess so that is actually Lewis's warning
yeah,
to the
yeah.
to
No,
the book's audience. So that's a warning to everyone else who's when we're talking about this. When we say Screwtape says such a thing, maybe that is what Screwtape believes, but maybe not. Maybe Screwtape, right? Is you could even get a little kind of creepy with it. Maybe Screwtape's trying to mess
mm,
with us as readers, right? Like what? Like
mm,
it's like, and Lewis actually wonderfully Lewis is not a horror writer, although he dabbles in
no,
horror, particularly in like his space trilogy series. There's some horror elements in some of the scenes. They're
but
not horror,
yeah,
but Lewis actually, I kind of, so I'm obviously a horror fan. I'm almost also a huge fan of Lewis. I wish he had written. I guess this is about as close to horror as he gets, is the Screwtape and Wormwood
but
stuff. But I
he was
really wish
writing,
he would have
yeah,
leaned into it because he's clearly good at inserting this just moment of like, wait, maybe Screwtape is lying to you right now, kind of like freaky kind of
mm,
fourth wall break kind of thing. That's pretty neat. I think that's a great writing technique.
mm.
I would have loved to
I'm
see
think
do more of that. It obviously was not the style of the time, and so that's fine. But yeah,
I'm thinking, yeah, I mean, Lewis was sort of writing at a time when horror. I mean, obviously horror existed, but as so formalized as we know it. Maybe it hadn't fully sort of formalized itself
There
yet.
was
It
the
was more
Gothic.
niche. It
I
was more
mean,
niche. Yeah. Yeah.
horror as we this does connect because
Yeah.
this is an Englishman writing really more about writing sort of via a quasi horror lens, horror comedy
Yeah.
lens about America.
Yeah.
Horror as we view it really is an American genre
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
Americans digesting the Gothic from Europe and then like doing their own take on the Gothic. And it's
Sure.
decidedly not Gothic anymore. Like
Sure.
when you read Dracula, for example, and then you read something like H.P. Lovecraft, you're like, whoa, like I guess these are all technically horror, but these are very different kinds of like stories. And Lovecraft was a great lover of the Gothic. But he's doing something
Sure.
very different. Or you can think about early American horror writers like Robert Bloch, the guy who wrote Psycho, the book or the story that Psycho
Hmm.
is based on. Like this is extreme, like in a way. Like the Gothic deals with the subtle. There's the horrific in the Gothic, but it as violent as it can be, it's also more subtle and it's like a mood. Whereas
Hmm.
American horror really is like something is chasing you and it's about to chomp you. That I mean that's just,
Yeah.
and so I would say that horror is really more of an as we view it now, horror is an
Yeah.
genre. Um,
Yeah.
I do
I
think the
think
Gothic,
in
I will give
America,
you, if I can give you some credit, your
yeah.
country some credit, I actually think the Gothic, um, particularly like specifically the English Gothic, or Anglo-Gothic. People like Stoker, M.R. James, obviously. I'm a huge fan. Dickens.
Yeah.
Um, I actually like that better than the American horror, even though I obviously am an American.
Sure. No, it's a
American
little
horror resonates with me as an American. I actually like the older Gothic better, but
sure.
yeah,
It's a little more, well, it's a little more what today would be called psychological horror.
right,
That
whatever that means.
that sort of I mean, yeah, what as
Yeah,
in
yeah,
today when the kind of more visceral violence is, you know, considered a bit tired, then psychological horror is what comes more modern. And and yeah, in America there'd probably be more of a vivid imagination for these violent depictions of like demons that will get you, given the
yeah,
religious environments in the time. So yeah,
yeah.
I can believe that horror as we know it is more generally American.
But
And
it's
just sort of
hilarious
going,
because most of the monsters of American horror are actually original. It's always a reinterpretation of European folklore,
yeah, no,
which is
yeah,
very interesting. Yeah,
of course,
yeah,
no, yeah, especially like Germanic and Scandinavian stuff
yeah.
is
It's yeah,
really vivid stuff. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah,
And just going back a bit to what you were saying about Screwtape and how we should take him and take him through that. Yeah, this maybe it's a bit so. I'm thinking of Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker
yeah.
in that as in just an example is because I recently rewatched The Dark Knight because before that I
So
thought, oh,
good.
it's kind of overrated, and I was like,
No, it's not.
I
It's
re
amazing.
I no I thought it was for time, and I rewatched it like, okay, this is better than I remember it. I mean, it depends on what sort of mindset I watch these films, and it's true that he will constantly tell different stories about like his
His origin.
upbringing,
Yeah,
or he'll tell different stories about what his plan is. Like at the beginning, he says we just need to kill the Batman, as in that's the sort of thing you might hear from Batman, the Joker alongside Adam West, but
yeah, yeah.
then later on he just keeps changing all his stories and all his life philosophies, and there are some things which are just clearly lies, but particularly the bit where he's like anarchy is fair. I mean, that's literally the opposite of anarchy, is it
Right,
being fair, because it's allowing the free entropy of the material world to go, and that naturally creates not fairness,
right.
so it's and that
Which
so
is also very well. I love that
it's
you're the way.
which is a testament to Heath Ledger's great portrayal and the great writing of that film. But
Yeah,
even though it's not quite comic accurate, quote unquote,
yeah.
but yeah, I that sort of comes to mind when you're talking about that.
Well, the free entropy of the
Yeah.
material world is also like a literally demonic thing, right? That's actually
Sure.
and so and that's yeah, and it's such a shame that that role actually killed Ledger, put him in a bad mental space. But how could you to really become that is a dangerous thing.
Okay.
I think. Yeah, I think that's the cautionary tale.
Mate, I mean,
Be
I
careful how
don't
well you
wait.
act, I guess, a role because it
I
can
don't
become real.
I don't want to speculate too much about what killed Heath Ledger,
Well, it definitely
but
didn't help. It definitely didn't help.
but I can't. Did he? Was it an overdose of sleeping pills or something? Well, I can't
Well, he
actually
was
remember.
already
It was
having drug alcohol issues, is my understanding.
yeah,
Already had mental
yeah.
issues. but I mean, playing the Joker like that probably didn't help. I don't think that helped.
Sure.
Yeah,
I haven't looked too much into the subject of depth to comment on that, and I try not to speculate too much because it's mean. But yeah, it is just astonishing. It
yeah,
was an astonishing portrayal, and he was younger than me. Fuck's sake, God, ugh, only 27 fucking years old, something like that. However old he was. Anyway, yeah, I the main thing about the comedy that's struck out is just the very funny but also very accurate analogies between different sinners and the food that would be served at this
yes,
banquet.
very
Like
funny.
it's so, and then talking about different types of sin and different types of sinners and you know the quantity and quality and how there's like different types of food. It's so funny, but
Super funny.
it is so true and so accurate. And about the differences in the, he's like, I could really go for a Herod or a Henry VIII, and it's true.
Yeah,
It's true there, but then there aren't really the Herods or the Henry VIIIs or the Hitlers. Well, the Hitler, of course, but like a majority of modern life is about um the about despotism and sin being kind of dissipated amongst the masses more so than it was before, to the point where you're less likely to get a Herod,
yeah,
but you are more likely to have this very steady diet of more of less potent sin to feast on if you're the
yeah.
devil, and that's so true.
It's very true. Yeah.
It's
It's like,
so true.
well,
It's
yeah, and I
yeah,
mean, and Screwtape talks about how like mediocrity produces a lot of sinners, but it doesn't produce great sinners. But it also kind of the mediocrity also makes it harder to make saints because there's like this and like the idea that what is it at the end or something like I mean I could flip forward and find it, but I think if you've read it, you'll know what I'm talking about. I do recommend everyone read it. It's a great little bit here.
yeah.
The like only what is it? It's something like only great sinners are capable of great repentance or something like that. Or it hits it like it. Let me see if I can find it. I actually ended up switching editions because I handed one of my editions to a friend and because I wanted people to read it, and then I had to pick up another edition here, and I haven't the page numbers are all different, so that's on me. The but I mean I think this is I don't know if that's if Lewis is explicitly going for kind of a Luther vibe, but that strikes me as a very Lutheran thing to say.
This
That
his
like to be aware of your like to repent is to be aware of the fact that you need grace, right? Like like if you pretend that you're fine, if you pretend everything is fine and they're just, oh, it's okay, it's just a little thing here and there. It's like, yeah, but if it's wrong, it's wrong. And so you're the mediocrity also kind of lulls you as a human into this sense of
and
like
the
it's not that bad.
and the
Um
the social conditioning, which
yeah,
I think a lot of the discussions about modernity compared to before, or as something I've read, which I think connects to this or might talk about, is the power of the powerless by Václav Havel,
yeah.
who is
Power of the
writing.
Powerless, I think is
Yes,
yeah.
yeah, he's right. Who is like a just a philosophical discourse on the situation in Czechoslovakia in the 60s,
60s.
70s,
Yeah. It
and
was
he talks a lot about repetitive rituals and how these rituals can become so autonomous that the power actually becomes so dispersed that it becomes so unlike a more traditional dictatorship. And a lot of it fundamentally just comes down to technological advancement in media and
yeah,
messaging.
yeah,
And maybe it can't, and to the point where you could just, if the printing press had been invented like a century or five, however many centuries earlier than it was, would the same would the exact same thing have transpired? If social media, if Twitter had existed in the 1500s, would things have just transpired a lot exactly the same way but earlier? And I do often think that a lot.
I think
If
well I
this
think
is
that
if
yeah,
this
if
is just a
anyone's
question of the means of socializing people.
yeah, I mean if so I'm gonna give us it's something of a self plug, but it also plugs I think I'm part of a bigger thing now, and yes,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do some of this because I don't tend to do this on my channel, but I'm helping out a friend. So um over on the Scarlet Thread Society, which is part of the Timeline Earth family of podcasts, the guy who runs that, Pause, he's been on this show. He's very kindly offered me a steady gig, so to speak, once a month, talking about various esoteric, strange woo stuff. One of the first episodes I did when I on his channel was about what I call the cyberpunk reformation, and so I agree with you 100% here, Fred. That yeah, it's not just the technology, but a lot of it is the technology. It's like the technology that allows
Yeah.
ideas to spread the way they do. So yeah, I mean, obviously, I think had Twitter or the printing press been, invented earlier, okay, it would have looked a little different, but the same, it would have rhymed. It would have rhymed.
Yeah.
Would have been
I
rhyming
mean,
that happens.
it's
Yeah.
like what is the difference between the way people reacted to swine flu and COVID? I mean, one is swine flu happened like at the same time as the invention of the iPhone, so before smartphones were absolutely ubiquitous
Yeah.
and everything else and social
I remember
media.
the swine flu freak out that was also like,
I
okay,
mean, it was a freak out, but I was like 11 or 12 at the time, and so yeah, I might not have been as perceptive, but if
I
I had been a
was a
kid,
freshman in
as a kid,
undergrad, so yeah,
as a kid during COVID, I would have felt the full brunt of everything because
right.
the kids were like locked up in schools with teachers that fucking hated them and
Well, it
you know
was.
just
I think we. I mean, this.
masking and
I
everything.
think we can say it was literal
Yeah,
child abuse.
yeah, no, it was yeah, it was a
Literal. I mean,
terrible.
locking children away for
It's
months on
like
time, months on
it's like
end.
the fuck.
It not.
It's like a
That's literal
fucking.
child abuse. Yeah.
It's like a fucking Holocaust,
So
literally.
if it's
It's
like
like a
right. So
fucking. It's like a fucking
If Uncle Vernon
ghettoization
is
of
if
children.
if Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia are wrong to lock Harry in the little cupboard closet thing for so long, well, what did we do to children during COVID?
I
I mean,
mean, people don't
come
want to
on.
fully come to terms. Sorry, what?
Well, I just
Sorry.
mean,
Oh, did
come
you
on,
want?
because people will be like, "Well, that's different." Like, no, it's not different. It's literally the same thing. And the Harry Potter generation will refuse to
Yes.
see that
Yeah, it's so.
they have become Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia.
Oh
Like,
my God.
you are them. Yeah.
Like the fucking like the fifth book where everything gets quite sort of Orwellian and
Yeah.
and the fact that people can't see kind of basic see sort of basic messages they might apply to their own lives is yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no, it was literally like a fucking Nazi ghetto sort of thing. It was
Yeah.
just the schools, and I truly think that there's so much that people just don't want to come to terms with because they, for one thing to be ultimately unjustified, then the whole thing will just fall like dominoes, and they just don't want to. It is so painful to. It'll be so painful for so many people to admit that because obviously loads of people still suffered, and yeah, it's just it's too much for people to bear. I think that's why. Anyway, um, what was I even saying before that? Oh God.
Well, I mean, we're talking about so I mean, one place I think we
Sorry.
can
Yes.
one of the strongest points
Sorry.
in
Technology socialization.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's something that's not mentioned in the actual or not alluded to in the text. It would be I like it's something that sounds like because of how insightful the text is and in how you know social environments work. It says here their consciousness hardly exists apart from the social atmosphere that surrounds them, and of course we have contrived that their very language should all be smudge and blur. What would be a bribe in someone else's profession is a tip or a present to theirs. Oh, just all these little things are so
yeah,
insightful as to how, as an analogy, like it's so perfect. But
yeah.
they don't. There's no mention of them talking about the newspapers or whatever. And it sounds
No,
like
I
the sort of
think
thing they would do. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, Lewis doesn't talk about that, and I think maybe I can only speculate.
mm,
I think it's because I think
yeah,
part of it is Lewis is a medievalist, and so Lewis is
sure,
thinking about words, the power of words, and I want to touch on incantory use of democratic in 2 seconds here.
yeah. Oh
I
yeah, of
think that's
course,
the
yeah,
strongest art part of this piece. But I think Lewis is thinking so much. I mean, I will say, I mean, I don't want to read too much of myself into Lewis because Lewis is way smarter than I'll ever be and way more accomplished than I'll ever be. But he's a medievalist and I'm a medievalist, and so he's thinking about the ideas and the words themselves. And I think it's only been recently that I have even started to think about the technology info technology as means of propagating ideas I think it's easy to get lost in the ideas and not think about the physicality of ideas, and by that I mean like the, as you say, the twitterness of it. Like these ideas are spreading via Twitter, or these ideas are spreading via like broadsheets in like the like early modern period. Somebody's printing a thing and just plastering it everywhere and people are like, what's this thing? Yeah, I think
yeah. Well, it's
Lewis, I think, was just that's not, yeah, that's kind of maybe that's even a more current
But it's
way
a
of
very
how ideas
it's a
spread through the physical means.
yeah
Yeah, it's actually probably more of a historian. I think that's more of a historian's take on it, as opposed to
yeah
uh medieval scholars who are really looking primarily more at like the work
yeah
themselves, as opposed to like
it's
who was printing what when and how many copies. So yeah,
sure yeah
yeah,
no, it's like it's like the idea of psychological rumination being a precursor to depression and mental illness and and then people are then which went like as in the symptom of psychological rumination, which then often dissuades people from acting on that, putting their thoughts into action and into practice. And then it's like a sort of cycle loop. And I'm just thinking on like a grand scale, all this media and information, especially in the social media age, is just this massive psychological rumination, which very rarely gets any practice done to it. Especially like with COVID, people rarely judge things on the basis of what has actually happened to them. It's all just stuff that people had been told by experts and whatever. Obviously, and the word science, the corruption of the word science, and the word science in that context helps with the way the word democracy is described in the text. As I'm just reading from an
it's
English
magic.
dictionary,
It's science.
Demo-
Don't you trust it?
democracy,
Trust the science.
democracy, democracy is the word with which you must lead them by the nose. Good work which our philological experts have already done in the corruption of human
I
language makes
love
it
that there's
unnecessary to
that
warn
hell
you.
has philological like demons working on philology. I like to think
Yeah,
that sometimes when I've been doing my research, because I am really a philologist, and I've like run into a problem and I can't break through this like tricky word problem. I'm like, I feel like it's just a fucking little sprite demon thing. Like the philologist, he's screwing with me. He's like, I gotta just punch through and he won't, and he
yeah.
like
This
gives me like
is
I feel like I've been struggling with those guys sometimes. I'm like, gosh, dang it. Like I can't find the little
yeah,
point that I need to find. And he's like, hee. I cannot
exactly.
help but think that Lewis might have also had some of those experiences and was like, I'm gonna write that into this a little bit. Like there's a
Of
hell has a
course.
philology department. It's
Well,
just
this it's the toast is happening at some sort of like school institution of learning. So I think
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what
it's
they're
the
talking
Tempter's
about. But
College.
yeah,
Yeah,
the fact there's yeah, the institution of learning of that.
yeah.
And yeah, of course, here we go. Aristotle's question whether democratic behavior means that behavior that democracies like or the behavior that will preserve democracy. For if they did, it could hardly fail to occur to them that these need not be the same. You are not to use the word purely you are to use the word purely as an incantation, if you like, purely for its selling power. It is the name they venerate, and of course it is connected with the political ideal that men should be equally treated, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is obviously
Well,
just so
well, let's keep
extreme.
going. Let's keep going. You then make it. This is Screwtape
Yes,
talking. You then
yeah,
make a
sure.
healthy transition in their minds from this
Mm.
political ideal to a factual belief that all men are equal.
Materially equal.
Yes, or just are equal in their abilities,
Mm-hmm.
which is obviously
Sure.
not true, right?
Practically equal.
Yeah, effectively
And
equal. I don't know yeah,
yeah,
practically is maybe
yes.
better, but yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Because
Uh,
obviously there's some material differences
if,
that are
if we
you
can keep
cannot
reading,
deny, but
this is not a live
yeah,
reading channel, but there's bits in here that are amazing, if
sure.
I may. And
No,
again,
yeah, no, yeah,
you and
go
I,
go ahead, yeah.
you and I have different editions, and so we'll just vibe with it here.
Okay, sure.
As a result, you can use the word democracy to sanction in his thought, meaning the person, the most degrading and also the least enjoyable of all human feelings. You can get him to practice not only without shame, but with a positive glow of self-approval, conduct which, if undefended by the magic word, would be universally derided. And I think that's severely insightful here. Um,
The feeling I mean is, of course, that which prompts a man to say, "I'm as good as you."
yeah,
Yes. No, I'm starting to realize how this is more. I didn't know when I first read the text before. I didn't really realize this, but I'm starting to make sense to me why this is for an American perspective because with the whole our sacred democracy thing is not big in Britain. It's not a very common thing in Britain, which is surprising, I guess.
well, it's because
But it's not. Yeah.
ultimately Cromwell lost in the end. in England.
Sure.
And in a way, he kind of, sort of won here, kind of, sort of won here,
Well,
kind of.
well, in the very English way, we did the best we really could to find some sort of warm, happy medium of all these extremes.
The Via
Obviously,
Media, very, very
obvi
Anglican.
of,
Yeah.
yes, very English, very obviously, you know, obviously there's lots of people that have been very dissatisfied with the way things in England have gone since the Civil War and since the Reformation. But yes, we it is in our English way. And secondly, on top of that, oh, literally, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh my God, I hate losing my train of thought. Oh yeah, and something yeah about the schools. There's a bit later on where they're talking about schools and how um the kind of standardized curriculum, which was completely not based on merit at all, is something that was much later than the 50s. So obviously where America dominates, the rest of the Western world follows
Yeah.
subsequently, whether it's
Sorry.
like
I have to acknowledge my
sexual.
historical guilt for that. Yeah, it's just
Yes, yes, acknowledge your white privilege, whatever. Um, whether it's like the sexual liberation or uh, schooling, economic policy, just all this stuff in since
can I do another
since the
quote?
First World War, essentially.
Can I do another
Hmm.
quote? Speaking of that,
Yeah, go.
speaking
Yeah,
of
go for it.
sexual liberation, all that, yeah. So this is again, this is
Yeah.
Screwtape talking a little bit later. All is summed up in the prayer which a young female human is said to have uttered recently. Oh God, make me a normal 20th century girl. Thanks to our labors, this will mean increasingly make me a minx, a moron, and a parasite. It's brilliant
Oh,
writing. Lewis was very, very witty. Um,
I don't know if that's in. I don't know if that's in my
there's
editions.
several editions of this. Yeah, that's the tricky thing is
Oh, I
it
think.
went
Oh,
through
I
different
thought we've read
editions.
different editions.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry.
unfortunately,
I mean,
this
okay. In my
yeah.
defense, what you sent me to read was some phone pictures of a book. You know,
Yes.
it's
And that's
difficult
the
to read.
edition. My brother in
Yes,
Christ, that's the edition I'm reading from. So there we go.
yes, I know. No, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just being picky.
I know.
Um,
You could have also
that
you
bit's
should
not
have
in
picked
there,
up a
but
copy. You're English, you should have this on your shelf. So
no, I do actually have a copy of
I
Screwtape
was
Letters,
helping
which
you
I've not read in
respect
full,
your cultural traditions. So
but
I was
yeah, I was most of the time when I was reading, I was away from home, so I just looked stuff up online and
yeah.
yeah, yeah, like
Uh,
oh God. So there's one of the bit that really and like I was reading this whole thing and I was just thinking what and who would be a really great person to like act it. Like someone could do a short film
oh yeah, like a
where
just a yeah.
someone where there's like a table and someone plays some screw tape and I'm just thinking who
I'm trying to
maybe
think.
could have got Heath Ledger to do it.
Yeah, Heath Ledger would have been really good.
Yeah, just it's so dramatic and so comical that
Maybe a
it lends
younger
it,
Anthony Hopkins could have done it.
it's yeah, it's just begging to be
Yeah,
dramatized in some way.
yeah. Well, it's all written in
And
first person. It's written as an
what
oration.
yeah, what would
It's
be the
yeah.
what would be the visual representation that they have of the food they're eating if the food is just a literary analogy to different sinners? Is there some way they could like make some dishes that look like people or something? And
Yeah.
I don't know. It would be a
You could
challenge, but it would be
go if
interesting.
you
It would be
wanted.
interesting to see what someone could
If
do
you
with it. Yeah.
wanted, you could go full HR Giger, like crazy,
Yeah,
insane. Like,
exactly, man.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, he's dead now, unfortunately. But
Right. But you could
we could have
draw from
done.
his
Yes.
work. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. H.L. Giger is another person who I think is one of these immersive horror people, or
yeah. I think so
because
too.
he was a very strange man, and I
Yeah.
think he said things along the lines of, oh, I'm a Satanist. But so yeah, I think he's more immersive. I mean, he's done some great work, of course. Um, but yeah, I think he was this more immersive character who was it's very very
What I
strange guy.
like what I like about well, see, Lewis still claims, which is great too. There's the kayfabe is amazing in here, is that Lewis claims that he is just engaging in diabolical ventriloquism, I think he calls it. So he's
Hmm.
just like he's like, this isn't me, this is Screwtape. And like
Sure.
he's
Yeah.
quick to say, like in the beginning of the full Screwtape letters. He's like, "This isn't me. This is Wormwood. By the way, be careful when speaking with demons. This is what they sound like." Which is like sort of a real cool kind of like it's almost like a role-playing game conceit like that. Like you're playing like you, dear listener or dear reader, are reading something that I got from a demon. Like there's a cool kind of like it's similar
Mm,
in some ways to how Tolkien claims, right, that like oh, all of the Lord of the Rings and the entire Middle Earth like legendarium, the whole mythos, I'm actually just translating that from books I found, which is a really cool kind of like world within a world that's being built. It's kind of a neat thing. Very few authors
sure.
do that nowadays. I really wish we need to bring that back because it's
Well,
really
it's
cool. Yeah,
I mean, a more kind of surface level interpretation of Tolkien and stuff is just being a vessel between the ancient and the modern. And if he himself is humble enough to say that, then that's just even better because
yeah.
a lot of this is just being a vessel for the ancient and the modern, or
So,
to
assuming
connect
that's
the
the
two.
case, it's cool how Lewis, or maybe just Screwtape, really in the end, right?
Hmm.
Points out how a little bit later that to bring it back to the democracy thing, um, uh, how democracy is well, I'll just read from it here. And it is not pretty to notice how or rather, and is it not pretty? See, I have to start thinking a little bit like a demon would find it
The
pretty. Yeah,
the
yeah,
dramatic rhetorical questions is so
yeah.
funny. Yeah, I can just
And is
imagine
it
someone delivering the lines, and it'd be so funny. Yeah,
Yeah, and is it not pretty to notice how democracy in the incantatory into the incantatory, what a word, sense,
incantatory.
yeah, incantatory, is not doing for us the work that was once done by the most ancient dictatorships and by the same methods? That for me was like, oof, was like big, like serious, like impaling blow, like, oh, because that is really, I mean, it's not unique to say or like brave to say. It's pretty easy to say. Yeah, like modern democracies are really kind of
Is
totalitarian.
this
They're
is
very
this where he talks about?
totalitarian.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
as in, if you literally take the word, because obviously the word totalitarian gets thrown around to describe most of the time just political enemies, rather than a sincere description. And if you literally take the word, then yes, because this is most of modern democracy, especially in light of COVID, whatever. It is total submission, as
Well,
in,
if I can give another shout out
mm,
to somebody with a much bigger following, but I do enjoy his work. Aaron McIntyre has written a book. I still need to read it. It sounds really good. The
mm,
Total State, but his idea of the total state,
yeah.
which
Oh, Aaron
which
Mac,
is
yeah. No, but
yeah, or the total
it's
state. It's in will be involved
it's
in every decision of your life is a state decision. Everything
because
is the state at all times. Even your
it's
desires of what you want are state dictated somehow, weirdly. Like what you eat
because
in the morning is somehow like, is it good for the climate if I have bacon? I mean, like these kinds of things, like it's
yeah, exactly.
insane.
Like
Like kind of,
it's
yeah,
well, it's more specifically the way I think is a good way to frame it is that obviously there are some things that it is good for people to hold in common, or
right.
may which religion is something that is designed to be universally adhered to in a given culture, which is
I would
why
say
so-called religious toleration has had more natural, you know, um, friction than it ought to have had done. The point is that how there's total submission on things that are supposed to be more, you know, there's supposed to be allowance for
organic.
leeway. Like the food you eat is like
Yeah.
killing polar bears. That's insane. That's like we take a step back and that's insane. So it's the idea. So obviously there are things that it is beneficial to be widely adhered to,
Yes.
but it depends on what those are, and when specifically when they are things that are so earthly, so material, despite the fact the material world is naturally fickle, naturally disparate. It's you, and the idea that you're trying to work against the material reality of the disparity of the world by making it so totally submissive and consistent is is that is totalitarian in the political, the material, the earthly sense.
Yeah.
And but the word totalitarian has
Totalizing.
been
Yeah.
yeah, it's totalizing. But of course, the word totalitarianism is now another kind of incantation word, even
Yep.
amongst like center right boomers and stuff. They just use the word to describe things so that it's not got much of a specific meaning anymore,
Right.
which is a shame because it's a very useful word. But
Well, semantic bleaching, I would argue that I don't know if you know what semantic bleaching
well,
is.
they speak about it in the thing. They talk
Yeah.
about
It's a demonic thing. Yeah.
blurring and yeah, it's exactly the
Yeah,
blurring
that those
of
that
of
the
of words
philology
and
department of
language.
hell has been hard at work.
Exactly.
And
The blurring
this
of
is why I am
language.
like
Yeah.
I'm out here trying to be like Theoden and rally the troops and be like, we need to have more philologists, more Christian philologists doing good philology because man, goodness gracious, you just can't even
Yeah.
words just don't mean anything anymore, and that's a problem. Like you can't. It's the gobbledygook. Like everything is just slop. Everything is just mind slop,
Like
and words don't mean things anymore. Yeah.
there's so much in here that, should be as acclaimed as because recently I went to see a play of 1984 and I'd read the book once a while ago, and so I was watching the play, and it was nice to kind of have a refresher of the sort of overall events. Obviously, it was quite abridged because you know, it's difficult to dramatize, and yeah, it was a little shit-lived, but yeah, the general gist of that compared to this, there's so much in this that could be far more acclaimed as like, you know, uh, literature that is analogous to modern totalitarian states. And obviously, people like to talk about Orwell being so prophetic about modern totalitarianisms, and especially like communism and after 1950. Just but there's so much in this. Like this is after the bit that you just talked about in the sense of doing work done by most ancient dictatorships
Hmm.
by the same methods. You remember how one of the Greek dictators, they called them tyrants then, sent an envoy to another dictator to ask advice about the principles of government. Second dictator led the envoy into a field of grain, and there he snicked off with his cane the top of every stalk that rose an inch or two above the general level. The moral was plain: allow no preeminence among your subjects. Let no man live who is wiser or better or more famous or even handsomer than the mass. Cut them all down to all slaves, all ciphers, all nobodies, all equals. Thus tyrants could practice in sense democracy, but now democracy can do the same work without any other tyranny than her own. No one need go through the field with a cane. The little stalks will now of themselves bite the tops off the big ones. The big ones are beginning to bite off their own in their desire to capitalized be like stalks.
Yeah.
And like that is something that could easily be, I don't know, something that O'Brien says to um Winston when he's being tortured, like all this stuff. And obviously the stuff that the O'Brien's monologues to in the torture scene in 1984 is very good, and I need to reread it actually. But yeah, it is pretty prophetic in the sort
I'll
of Orwellian
confess.
sense.
I'll confess in a moment of I actually have not read 1984. I need to. I actually have not.
Well,
I
it
read because
depends whether
part of it is
it
I read
depends.
Animal Farm and I was like, that's fine.
Yes,
Animal Farm's fine.
yes,
Everyone's like, you got to read
yes,
1984. I'm like, yeah, I know it's on my list. And everyone's like, shocker, you haven't.
yes.
Yeah, no, I actually haven't read
No,
everything. Be reading things that are.
it depends whether or not you have falsely claimed to have read it, which a lot of people,
I have not read it. Yeah.
it's the most common book that people claim to have read, which they have not.
Yeah.
And if as long as you have not falsely claimed to have read it, because
No,
lots of people do that, then that's fine.
no.
And yeah, it's not like it's not so acclaimed as this great work of literature, and it's quite late in the days, 48, and
Yeah.
so but it is, yes, most people who've claimed to have read it have not, and fewer people have
I've
actually read
read
it than
I read Animal Farm, and then I read actually
mm,
weirdly I read Homage to Catalonia, which is actually really good. I actually really enjoyed that book
yes.
wholeheartedly. So yeah,
No, I might read that because I want to understand more about.
it's insane.
I want to understand
Insane.
more about I don't know much about the Spanish Civil
So
War,
crazy.
although
Yeah.
I've firmly come to the conclusion I don't give a fuck about, saying that the Spanish Republicans were a bunch of cunts, and I don't care how, fascist sympathetic that makes me. But
Yeah.
no, I also read that, and I might read Down and Out in Paris and London as well. I studied Animal Farm in school when I was like 13, so I'm
Yeah.
quite well into Animal Farm, and Yeah, I
Do
studied
we
that in school.
do we want to just transition to later in the text where he talks about universities and schooling, like explicitly about schooling?
Yeah, can I just read this funny bit,
Yeah,
which is
read.
in relation,
Yeah.
which is in that topic, and it's. Let's start. The bright pupils. Here we go. Children who are fit to proceed to a high class may be artificially kept back because the others would get the trauma. This is so prophetic of today. Oh my God,
Yeah, the
this
trauma.
bit with the hang on. Children who are fit to proceed high class artificially kept back because the others would get the trauma. Dashes Beelzebub. What a useful word. Like,
I love that he like profanes his own
oh,
profane lord. Like he uses his
this
own
is
Dark
so.
Lord's name in vain, which is
Yes,
very
this is
funny. Yeah,
this is so funny. This is
yeah,
hilarious.
yeah.
By being trauma, Beelzebub, what a useful word. By being left behind, the bright pupil thus remains democratically fettered on his own age group throughout his school career, and a boy who would be capable of tackling I can't read that, or Dante, sits listening to his coeval's attempts to spell out a cat sat on a mat. In that's a perfect analogy for the American schooling system, but that's what
Yes.
the British one came to be later on, a bit more later on, a bit later on, which and is still
I
ridiculous.
think it's Aeschylus. It's how I've heard it pronounced, but yeah.
Aeschylus, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
Aeschylus. Yeah. The
In a
Orestia,
word,
right? Yeah, the Orestia. I believe that's him. Yeah, yeah.
In a word, we may reasonably hope for
Double check that.
the virtual abolition of education when I'm as good as you has fully had its way. That sort of reminds me of the idea of communism, where, there's all this stuff being done by the state, but then they say the state will involuntarily wither away. And
Right.
that's sort of true. That's sort of true here. It's like education withering away when the more traditional understandings of education have been infiltrated, then education almost literally withers away to the point where the authorities could probably no longer call it education and no one would care because they're so, entrenched in it. And yeah, I found that quite interesting.
It also talks about taxation, which is interesting here.
It does, yes.
Um,
Oh yeah, yeah, here we go.
yeah. It's
Of
better to be
course,
read
this
in
would not.
British voice, so because it's you go. Yeah.
Thank you. Of course, this would not follow unless all education became state education, but it will. That is part of the same movement. Penal taxes designed for that purpose are liquidating the class which was prepared to save and spend and make sacrifices in order to have its children privately educated. The removal of this class, besides linking up with the abolition of education, is fortunately an invisible effect on the spirit of on the spirit that says, I'm as good as you. This was, after all, the social group which gave to the humans the overwhelming majority of their scientists, physicians, philosophers, theologians, poets, artists, composers, architects, jurists, and administrators. If ever there was a bunch of tall stalks that needed their tops knocked off, it was surely they. As an English politician remarked not long ago, a democracy does not want great men. Oh man, this is also fucking
Yeah,
amazing.
but it hits hard because
Yes.
I mean, this
I
is the thing
mean, as a,
in the US, I mean, talking about a war, people do talk about a war on the middle class in the US, which is just true. Um,
this is another interesting thing. Like in America, the reverence for the middle class is just unheard of in Britain. Like the word middle class, there's not a hatred for the middle, but the word middle class is used as a sort of derogatory phrase
means something
to re
different.
to refer to like even liberals in America will have a reverence for the idea of a
Well,
middle class.
you do know that a certain
And
someone running for president was raised middle class with
you know,
two PhD parents, and you were raised middle class.
oh
Apparently, this person also
yeah,
worked at McDonald's, although now another someone running for a president has objectively worked at McDonald's longer, which I think is hilarious and is a kind of pettiness that I can appreciate. So,
just quickly on the McDonald's thing. Brief aside, the whole thing of Trump going to McDonald's and then on Twitter, I merely searched this thing came to mind. It's like, is Trump going to bring back beef tallow in McDonald's?
yes.
And I searched beef tallow. I just searched the phrase beef tallow in Twitter, and like at least a dozen other accounts had just thought of beef tallow in relation to
Did you
Trump.
see that
It's like
RFK? Did
Trump
you
is
see
bringing back
RFK's
beef
point?
tallow. Yeah.
Did you see that
Yes,
RFK
no,
tweeted about beef tallow?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
he
yeah,
did as
yeah,
well. Yeah, it's
yeah.
like just the mere association with Trump and McDonald's. So many people simultaneously think, "Bring back beef tallow," and I'm just like, "Yes, yes, this is
Yes.
real. This is a movement."
Yeah, it is a movement. Yeah, and
I
yeah,
loved,
in the yeah,
I loved. Oh, I love that. Like it, just completely spontaneous. It just everyone gets it. It's
yeah.
great.
It is awesome. Yeah,
Anyway,
there's white, as
mm,
many black pills as there are. There's little white pills popping up, and I'm trying to grab them and eat
yeah,
them as
man.
I can.
Oh
It's like
man, yeah.
yeah, like I
We
need
re
some hope. Yeah, I need a little bit of levity. Um,
Yeah, man. I mean, I just, I can't.
well, and so here,
How can I not help but find this good? You know, I
and so
just find something good,
yeah, find something good that is really
find
good.
some light in the dark.
Yeah.
You know,
Um,
just little things like that.
and so here you can really see. So thank you for providing the English perspective on this, because here you can really see that while Lewis is saying England, he really means America. Because I actually do, I mean,
Sure.
in America, the middle class does provide these things, or at least has provided these things, these
Well,
very kinds of people that we need. Like,
they
like
do everywhere, don't they? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's like it's the people who are upwardly mobile but not securely rich who want to succeed and push and try new things and strive and like, good Protestant work ethic being put into place. This kind of stuff.
Of
Um,
course.
yeah, and there really is, I mean, this is obviously class distinctions look different in England and the US, but I mean,
A
like
little bit, but
a
I mean,
little bit. But there's, I mean, there,
there'll be more overlap between these class distinctions than like I don't know Somalia or something. Yeah. So yeah, there'll be a lot of overlap, and but yeah, but the it's more the idea of the rhetoric around class being so different, but even though the actual economic mechanisms are going to be quite similar at the end of the day. Like I have middle class friends and I see them and they'll just be casually talking about, oh yeah, I'm doing this training, I've got this better paying job, and there's not they they're just living their lives and doing stuff, the values that they were individually raised with or that their families did. They might have had a slight sheltering from wider discourse, but then things can still be so different with the word middle class having these slightly derogatory connotations in
yeah.
here, whereas even liberals in America will have reverence for middle class, and most liberals. Obviously, there are loads of fucking
Well, it's an
radical
identity
leftists in
marker,
America.
as we've seen this
Yeah,
election cycle, particularly for Harris. It's an identity marker, and Walz too, right? Yeah, like they're both trying to say middle class. Like they use it as an incantatory word. I can say it right this time. It's a shibboleth for them. Middle class, middle class, middle class, middle class. They're just saying it. Like you're just saying this word. And in the words of Inigo Montoya, I don't really think I don't really think it means what you think it means. Like middle class, middle
hmm
class, middle class, middle class. I'm like, right, but that you're clearly not middle class. The way you act is not middle class. Your values, at least for me growing
yeah.
up, like
Like
that's not middle class. Yeah.
in Britain, it's more a case of people wanting to emulate the idea of being working class, and it's like it's the whole I'm the same as you sort of thing. It's so potent here. The idea of wanting to appear, like the current Prime Minister Keir Starmer has had people mock him a lot for saying in something, "My father was a tool maker," and everyone has been mocking him for that. And more recently, he's talked about his new tax policies and how, like, I don't think people owning shares or being landlords or whatever, that's not real work, which is obviously just like bog standard, leftist
Yeah, it's Marxism.
leftist anti-capitalism,
Yeah.
and it's a bunch of nonsense. But yeah, there's just a bit more potency around that here in terms of what is authentic working class, and hence people being seen to be working class is more of a cred. Like there's a candidate now for the leader of the Conservative Party, and she spoke about, I once worked at McDonald's, therefore that makes me working class. Like, first of all, I mean, actually, yes. That what is it that makes people not working class if they're doing manual wage labor like that, menial manual wage labor like that? Is it the fact they had a different upbringing, or what is it? I mean, there's some ambiguity there. And secondly, why are people so desperate to be working class? It's just so circumstantial as to what the culture demands. Like in America, people saying I was middle class, or this, that, and the other. This is why we need more people like Trump who just said, I don't give a fuck about your social conventions. I'm just going to say, my father gave me a small loan of $1 million. Like this is how, like, yeah, I'm a rich businessman. I've got this house with all this gold gilding and there's all this gilded and these shiny furniture. I'm a rich motherfucker. This is me.
Yeah.
I'm not pretending to be anything I'm not. My father gave me a loan of a million
Well,
dollars. Fuck you.
yeah. Well, and I also really like, again, I think as I've said at least somewhere, man, maybe not said,
People appreciate the fucking honesty.
they appreciate honesty, and I think you really see that
They,
also in Trump's
as
running
in,
mate.
as
I'm
in,
actually more of a fan of Vance than I am of Trump. I don't know if you've read
sure.
Hillbilly Elegy is an amazing book, man, but
I
that is
saw,
rough. That's a rough book to get through. That's like that's a
I saw the film.
what a childhood. Like holy crap. Like it's
I
insane.
saw the film, and I saw the film, and in retrospect, I just find it amazing that this film got made with these names attached to it.
Yeah.
Like it's a this guy that's clearly, like, people criticize the book for being, bootstraps, propaganda, blah blah blah, and obviously that's not a
It's
thing that
actually not what
people
the
in.
book is at all, but that's okay.
No, yeah, there's probably that's the way the film goes, and I'm sure JD Vance had some input on the film.
Yeah.
Um, and I know JD Vance has had this time in it, like, because I used to not really like him that much because I assumed he was gonna say all this stuff that was sort of post-liberal. I worry that that's what he was gonna be, and I've more people are finally coming around to seeing the post-liberals as being a bunch of frauds, like fucking Sohrab Ahmari or
Yeah, I know, but
Patrick
that's you
Deni
it's you in the Amari battle
Pat,
that you're constantly on. Yeah.
Patrick well, he's blocked me. Patrick
Yeah.
Deneen, um, and in England too, people like Mary Harrington or something.
Oh,
Um,
Harrington I have the biggest issue with.
yeah, she's
He's
fucking
a snake in the grass.
yeah, she's awful. And look,
Awful.
there's an article,
Awful.
there's an article where she literally
There's no
she was
such
like
thing.
giving,
Sorry, I'm going to say it. Can I just say it? Because it's my channel. And if
yeah,
we get taken down, we
yeah,
get taken down. There is no such thing as reactionary feminism. It does not exist. It is not real.
no, words have meaning.
Yes.
Do you know who coined the term feminism? Charles Fourier, a utopian socialist, one of the most influential socialist thinkers in the modern times. And then obviously the definition of feminism, yeah, yeah, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Fuck that bitch. Um, what was I even saying? Yes, I had this worry that JD Vance was gonna be a kind of post-liberal type person, which is why I was just skeptical of him. And he when he was sort of making waves by, like, he ran in Ohio, didn't he? Something like that.
A1 in Ohio. Yeah.
Yeah. And I saw the film. I thought the film wasn't that bad as a film,
I'm,
and I'm just so
I
surprised that
actually,
something
so I
where
actually haven't.
whilst yeah,
Yeah, I actually haven't seen the film because I don't want to see it because I actually the way I recommend people read the book is actually to listen to Vance read it himself. He did the audiobook.
sure,
And
sure,
that is the best way I think that story should be
sure,
told aloud by the person who lived it, and it's very interesting. I recommend it wholeheartedly. Yeah,
sure. No,
yeah,
yeah, I will do that. In coming, especially in the context of the election and stuff. But
yeah.
yeah, the film portrays his story in a kind of like bootstraps stuff. I mean, I'm saying that in a way that a liberal would be derogatory of.
Right.
I mean, obviously, it's a good thing to, you know, turn despair into prosperity. That's not something that you should snigger at. It's
Yeah,
something that millions of people do all the time successfully, and as soon as they do it, they will see every person being derogatory about it and say, "Well, that's just a lie because I did it." You know, if I
yeah,
can do it, so can you, etc. And yeah, I'm just surprised that so many people big names in Hollywood were attached to this film when Hollywood itself is so hostile to that sort of, narrative. Like, there's fucking Ron Howard, Glenn Close, Amy Adams, and it's just really weird how those people
yeah.
got into this film. And Glenn Close she was actually quite funny. I was watching it with my mum, and she was just laughing because her character's like always got a fag in her hand. It's always
Yeah.
always got a cigarette, and she's just, walking around, and it was really funny.
His Mima
she
was,
was a
but
good
I'm certain
Mima, yeah.
they
Mm,
toned it down in the movie because the stuff that his Mima does and says is so out of control hilarious in the book.
yes,
Yeah, it's just
yes. The film, yeah.
yeah.
It's I'd be interested to see the difference. But she's good. I mean, Glenn Close is a great actress, isn't she?
Bunkos is
And
a good actress for sure.
she's she's, quote unquote, aged gracefully
Right.
to the point where, she's able to kind of just settle into doing these roles of older women, and, she's
Yeah.
still getting Oscar nominations and stuff.
Yeah.
But she does this really well. She did this really well, yeah. And
Yeah.
Amy Adams was was okay, but the whole thing was a little too. I can understand people criticizing it for just being a kind of like sort of propaganda film for a certain political viewpoint.
Yeah.
Sort like as in if it's just a thing for. I mean, obviously the message is still correct because people
Right.
routinely, do things that give them the willpower to change their lives for the better. People do that, and that's a thing that actually happens rather than it being like a narrative that people kid themselves with or whatever. But yeah, I should listen to the audiobook.
Yeah, it's very good. So if we want to try, maybe just get to the end here a little bit.
Yes,
Screwtape
sorry.
starts. No, you're good. This is part of it.
Mm-hmm.
We go on tangents. It's just part of it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the Screwtape talks about how democracy, as hell conceives of it, actually is really good at destroying democracy as I think human ideals conceive of it, which is kind of interesting. How this um like the demonic democracy idea is very like contradictory to actual democracy, which is
Yes, that
theft. I think that's definitely done by Lewis or maybe Screwtape, whoever's
this
talking.
is something this is something we should go into. The writing in here, this is where I think sort of Lewis's own ideas, his own sort of ideas he personally has are kind of bleeding through quite a lot of him trying to say something. And
Yeah,
he keeps making this distinction between democracy and, you know, uh incantatory, what was the word you used?
incantatory. Yeah, yeah,
Incantatory democracy. Like he's still trying to make, and he even Screwtape is saying this stuff. So this is the bit
yeah.
where I think this is the bit where I sort of suspect that Lewis. Okay, we have different editions. I don't know, but there's a bit where Lewis is kind of wanting to really make it clear that there is such a thing as democracy that still exists. And I'm not sure how I feel about it. Not that I'm not like a complete democracy doomer, but like democracy is a particular custom of a particular people.
Yes.
So it works for the people that have a heritage of
And we've
it.
done a whole episode on this, you and I.
Yes,
Yeah,
we have. We've talked about it.
yeah.
And but I am just so curious why he's, even in this very kind of ironical,
I have an idea for why.
thing, he himself is making sure every mention of democracy gets this disclaimer. It's like there's
I have an idea.
democracy in the real sense and
Yeah,
the
I have an
fake
idea,
one.
and I think it has to do, regardless of your opinions of democracy. I think it
Yeah.
has to do with Lewis's view of evil,
Hmm.
and that, and this is not unique to Lewis. Lewis has his own way of talking about it. This is, I do think, and I mean, I can't talk to him, but I think this has to do with a Boethian view of evil, which
Hmm.
most Western European medieval scholars would have had, and then Lewis, as somebody who's enamored with that time period, and has read a lot of it, would have also known. And obviously the English have had, well, maybe not obviously. I should be not uh, so presumptuous. England has had a love of Boethius, even though Boethius wasn't English, for a very long time. Alfred the Great commissioned a partial translation, I think it was, of Boethius's Constellation of Philosophy into, I want to say Old English. I might be wrong. Yeah, no, no, no. He commissioned, I think, a partial translation. So that's relatively early, and I mean that is like super early English history in the sense of an idea of a unified England. So
Hmm.
it's deep. It runs deep. Even though Boethius was not English, he's kind of also become English in a way. And
Hmm.
Boethian view of evil is also quite strongly taken up and used quite effectively in Lord of the Rings by Tolkien and his entire, I mean, the Silmarillion, the entire Arda mythos. Um, and all right, and so everyone's standing on each other's shoulders. That's fine, right? We all stand on the shoulders of giants. Um, but
Hmm.
I think Lewis is trying to say that democracy could be fine, or maybe even ideal, maybe not for everyone, but maybe for a certain particular kind of group of people. Maybe in
Yeah.
this case Americans would, but if it's properly constituted, and the nature of evil is such that it always seeks to bend inward on itself and then to take other things and bend them inward on themselves. And so the diabolical version, the demonic version of democracy that Screwtape is wanting to propagate is a turned in on itself, knock down all tall
Mm.
poppies, all tall stalks, no excellence, none of this, everything the same, and then that leads to the destruction of what actually could maybe be a good form
Yeah.
of government. And so
Yeah. Well, I
I
mean,
think I
uh,
like that. I like that because I think it's
yeah.
easy to say democracy always bad because we live in frankly demonic democracies. But I don't know if it's
Yeah.
necessarily bad in and of itself. It's clearly bad in how it's being, and
We
we've talked about this, and how it's being instantiated or manifested in the world, to use something more of a spiritual term. It's manifesting in a demonic way. But
yeah.
maybe it's not necessarily demonic, but we've had such
Hmm.
strong experiences, particularly in the past several years, of demonic democracy that it's easy to conflate it. And I think that
Sure.
Lewis is trying to be careful in this and very like carefully parse this. And again, you can disagree with him on this. I don't even know exactly how I feel with him on this, but I appreciate that he's willing to do that. I think it would be easy for Lewis to have said all democracy is literally bad all the time, all demonic, all the bad, all the time. I think that people like quote unquote trads on Twitter are notorious for this, and they tend to be Catholic.
Yeah.
And all the love to my Catholic friends, but I do think that there's something notably English and Anglican about this approach of, well, hold on, maybe it's bad, maybe we need to be a little bit more, maybe it has to do with, is this form of government actually grounded in a people and a place? And if not, maybe that's the
Mm.
problem. Maybe it's not being properly grounded. It's maybe like
Yeah.
electricity. Electricity can kill you or it can run things great. Is it grounded properly? Is it done in a proper way? That is incredibly, I mean, I'll romanticize your culture a little bit, but it is incredibly English. It strikes me as incredibly English. Like, hey, maybe
Yes.
we need to have a proper understanding of it. And if we don't have a proper, if we have an improper understanding of it, of course it's going to go wrong because we're not properly understanding it. This is my
Yeah.
question. Feel free to disagree, but
Well, it's
I guess I'm arguing in favor of what Lewis is doing here. I
yeah.
liked that,
No,
but
I don't. I no. I think you've got a very sound understanding of it and of democracy. Yeah, I would add to some of that. I've just been thinking maybe Lewis was also writing in a sense that he genuinely did not want to make it come across as if he thought he wanted people to get the impression, readers, that he thought democracy was demonic. So so when he's specifically talking about democracy, that's the point in the text where he's like making sure that even Screwtape has a distinguishes between a more grounded democracy and a more demonic one. And like it comes down to what is democracy at the end of the day? Well, it's an earthly custom,
right,
an earthly human custom, and you can't make an idol out of that,
right.
or you shouldn't, because it's an earthly entity, which is not,
Well, and Screwtape
you
wants
know,
you to make an idol out of it because
yes, and if
damn,
that's
right,
what
yeah.
it like maybe he could have used, maybe if he'd used the word idol more, he might have got the point across better to general audiences if he'd
But
used the
he's
word
writing from
idol.
the perspective of a
But
demon. So do demons? So
yes,
this is an interesting question, and this is a little bit maybe getting more into the realm of how many angels can dance on a pinhead. But
mm,
like, can demons have idols? Because they kind of are idols in a way, right? Like
well, it
in
depends. Well,
like,
it
but
depends
look,
if
hear me out,
they're
hear me out, hear me out. This
yeah.
is so I'm not necessarily this is me riffing on my own. I'm not saying Lewis is saying this, but this is triggering a thought. I'm having a trauma.
Mm,
I'm getting a trauma right now. Like in ancient time, in ancient, like in older Christian writings, particularly like
mm,
early Christianity, um, the local gods of a place were usually synonymous with demons. And so
yeah.
it's like, and so like the demons, the idols are really demons. Um, and this kind of demonology is interesting. I don't and obviously there's not just one demonology in Christianity. It's a complex thing that changes over time, but there's something about that that's kind of interesting. It's like maybe Screwtape, like, can demons have idols or are they just idols themselves? So maybe if we take that, and I'm not saying Lewis is saying that, I'm just experimenting with this, then maybe Screwtape is incapable of saying the word idol. And so maybe he's just acting like
Sure.
an idol or acting like an idolatry encourager, something like that. But like
He's
he right? Like he's the concept of idol is something that like people who recognize that it's bad would have. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, he's like he maybe Screwtape can't even think in that way, is what I'm trying to say.
It I mean it lends itself to how it's demonic when arrangements like the difference between demons and Beelzebub, when stuff like happens on Earth emulates that. That's why it's so dictatorial and why you literally are forbidden from thinking certain concepts,
Yeah.
which is why so they literally cannot, maybe constitutionally they cannot think or speak in that way, and it's a testament to how it's demonic when such things happen
Right. I
on
guess the
Earth, where
idea
there's
is
such massive dictatorships. And
yeah.
so yeah, and I see what you mean. Yeah,
I mean, like, I guess the idea is that demons cannot fall because they're already fallen, something like that. And so
sure.
they're already locked in. They're locked in this certain way. This also, if anyone's interested, some weeks ago, me and Bulge, friend of the show, did a whole breakdown, in excruciating autistic detail of 1998's Fallen, which is a great movie starring Denzel Washington, about like demonic possession and what that happens when like how demons operate and different
Mhm.
artistic views of how demons operate. And so that movie has one sort of internal demonology. This work as well has an internal demonology. And I don't think either the
Sure.
movie or Lewis here is trying to argue like theologically for this in like the strictest sense,
Yeah.
using it as an artistic setting, very much like Dante would and did to discuss the problem of evil. And so I think that yeah, like but
Mm.
in this particular perhaps artistic demonology that exists in Screwtape Proposes a Toast, I do think there's something to that. Like Screwtape, as you've been saying, he just can't think certain
Mm.
things. Certain things
Mm.
they're truly inconceivable for
Hence,
him. Like they just don't even
hence,
yeah.
hence, it is very demonic when such circumstances come close to existing, to genuinely existing in real life. Like in people, like I read the memoir of a woman who used to be a Red Guard in the 60s in China when she was a teenager, and she would, she would think that her thoughts were, you know, evil, and she, like, constitutionally she wasn't allowed to think any other way. And so it is demonic when such circumstances are able to even be created in some way on it, because
Yeah,
we can only emulate them as much as we possibly can. But
right.
it's when the control is so penetrative that people start, when the large stalks start cutting themselves down instead,
Right.
it's like that. Just going back a bit, just talking
Mhm.
about democracy as a custom, and yes, it is true. Democracy, as we know it, is an American export, which itself is a sort of English export. Although, of course, the American export is one that is tinged with Prussianisms.
Oh yeah.
They there's a little in my edition. There's a little thing about Hegel. Hang on, let me just
Oh yeah, no,
quickly
I noticed
find
that too. Yeah,
that.
Hegel. I was like, yeah, Hegel.
Yes.
And anyone who follows me on Twitter knows that I'm a Hegel disrespector.
That
So
that invaluable man Rousseau first revealed it. In his Perfect Democracy, you remember, only the state religion is permitted, slavery is restored, an individual is told that he has really willed, though he didn't know it, whatever the government tells him to do. From that starting point, via Hegel, brackets, another indispensable propagandist on our side, we easily contrived both the Nazi and the communist states, etc.
yeah.
Um, like so that's the American export, is this sort of Prussian English high
Mhm.
Prussian Anglo-Saxon demonic hybrid sort of
Well,
clusterfuck thing. But
think about early 20th century America. Who were the two biggest ethnic groups in America?
the Germans and the British.
Anglo-Saxons and then German
But
people of
Rose,
action.
but hang on, but there is a slight thing there in that Woodrow Wilson was a Scottish Calvinist and the Roosevelts were Dutch
There's always some
reformed.
other,
So
yes,
there are so
right.
I
I
what
know, but you hear
the
what I'm.
int the in the intelligentsia had certainly become more Prussian
Prussianized.
sympathetic, Prussianized in
Yeah.
over the course of the 19th century, and then Woodrow Wilson's Calvinism is, I think, obviously he was a big admirer of German thinkers. Like
Well, because
yes, yes,
Well, because
I read
Prussia
that
was a very Calvinist place. But Prussia was a
he
very
used
Calvinist society.
he worn out a German dictionary. He is said to have worn out his German dictionary when doing a lot of his writing, because he was obviously he was an academic before he was a politician, and um, and then of course you have the Roosevelts, who are Dutch, and if there is like a Calvinist influence there, or a
Although
reformed
this is
influence,
a topic for another day, but the Roosevelts, I think, have which Roosevelt you're talking about, and I think that they have a very different
they're all related.
idea. Their Calvinism is not as Prussianized.
Eleanor Roosevelt was her maiden name, literally.
Yeah,
Fucking
I know.
hell.
But
Sorry, carry
I
on.
guess I'm trying Teddy or FDR, because those are very different types of the family, the brand. They're just different. It's just there's connection, but they're not the same. I'm a Teddy admirer, so that's my thing. The axe that I'm grinding here is I actually like Teddy quite a bit. So
I mean, he's the
obviously I
more
hate FDR.
admirable. He's the more admirable Roosevelt, but I think he's also responsible for a lot of bad stuff that people don't want.
Oh well,
That
I'm
more
actually distant.
more intelligent
I
people.
actually am distantly related to the Roosevelts, so I take historical
Okay,
interest in
I'm going to have to end the call now. I'm joking, of course. The thing I'm trying to get, not I've just been don't Switzerland.
Also
The
very
thing which
Calvinist.
the thing that I go back to a lot when I'm talking about what's a good place to emulate. Switzerland have a mechanism of democracy that is so unique in that there's lots of referendums, and sometimes local politics will have decisions where literally there's a crowd of people standing in front of, the town hall, and people will put their hand up for yes or not. So like this is very participatory, but it's not participatory democracy in the stupid demonic American sense.
Yeah.
And it it is it does work quite well for general non-ideological ends, and it's been extremely tested in more recent years with the fucking Russia-Ukraine thing,
Yeah.
and with more things like they have all these referendums about like the same-sex marriage and gender stuff, and and of course they were the last country in the world to join the IMF, which was a kind of nail in the coffin for them as like a sort of last stronghold
Yeah.
of sanity in Europe.
Yeah.
And of
Sadly.
course, they joined the United Nations in 2001. Yeah, like all this stuff that they had going for them, which is sadly crumbling now.
Yeah.
But like that is like if democracy is this great sacred thing, then how is it permitted that loads of different countries have their own specific
Well,
mechanisms?
can I,
It's
yeah. Can I tell
yeah,
you about one
that's
thing
the
that
sort of contradiction.
this is striking me? So, I know you haven't
Sure.
read this book, so but I'll tie it in. So another Lewis work that I highly so his space trilogy is quite good. In that Hideous Strength, there's a bit, which is the third one. I won't, I'll just spoil a tiny bit. There's a bit where is it Ransom? I forget which character is talking about this, but you can clearly tell this is Lewis kind of writing as himself. That like he distinguishes between what is it, Britain and England, and that England is this thing of like that embodies the goodness of the English people, and that Britain is this like modernist technocratic nightmare that has come about. And I think that, and Lewis like sort of that it sort of invites comparisons. Like for me, I'm like America versus the United States, right? Like, holy shit, it's the US Army we're invading versus America is this place of like embodying certain ideals that I think are really good, but I hate the US global empire because of like what it's become. Lewis was
Yeah.
very apt to slice things like this, and not perfectly.
Sure.
It's hard, like to
Sure.
dissect, like it's like you're removing something, like an infected region of skin, and you're taking
Mm.
it out. Like, and so I think that maybe is what he's doing here at the end with democracy, the two different or the different types of
Yeah.
democracy is like, and Lewis was also big about not throwing out. Obviously, he wanted the bathwater thrown out, but he's like, but do not throw out the baby because that's a shame to do that.
Yeah.
He also,
It's
Lewis was quick to point out, or was notable to point out that demons can trick you in various ways. One of them is to trick you to drink the bathwater, which you shouldn't do. But also, demons can trick you to actually just gleefully chuck children out with the bathwater and say that I'm doing the right thing as you're like throwing a child out the window. So, and this is like,
mm,
so I think that that's the caution is here is like to the reader,
mm,
be very careful about what you're reacting against and how you're doing that, because you can actually
yeah.
end up doing something of the demon's will in trying to do the good thing.
It's
Yeah,
like people say, like tradcasts might say, not all Catholics, just they might say something like um pregnant man was inevitable as soon as the Mayflower docked.
right.
Like, come on,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. Come
This
on, man.
that sort of thing. Lots of lots of people like to condemn England for being so liberal compared to the rest, too liberal and
Yeah,
atomized and individualized by liberalism compared to the rest of Europe because, for example, there's a much younger average age that you leave home that someone leaves home their parents' home compared to Catholic Europe.
yeah,
And when you actually look at it, it's actually just a sort of Protestant Catholic divide or a
yeah,
Germanic romantic divide. It's
yeah,
more historical, it's more cultural. And so in Britain, we get accused of being too liberal compared to, I don't know, Italy or Spain for things like that. And it's like, no, it's just a customary thing. And it's not,
yeah,
you know, it's not like it's not where does it where there is no golden tablet that says that it's bad to leave your to leave the home of your parents at uh eight at 18 rather than 32. Like where does it actually say that? Like it's just a customary thing that obviously we can have moral conversations about, I suppose, but
right.
yeah, people are jumping to conclusions about certain things being ideologically tinged when that they're not like that,
Yeah,
yeah,
I love the Tradcath memes blaming Martin Luther for everything, and then I love the counter memes where like
yeah,
I
fuck
saw one
that.
recently. A guy's like has a ball of Christmas lights, and they're all in like a huge ball, and he's screaming at it, and it says, "This Martin Luther did this," which has made me very happy. So yeah,
There's like, and also there's like even Luther himself will admit that proto-reformers were, I think he called John Wycliffe the morning star of the Reformation, who's
yeah,
an English writer. And
English.
like I'm
Yeah,
imagining that scene, that scene in it's a meme. It's in Scary Movie 4 or something where that black girl is looking around a corner and she's like wincing in pain or something at something that's around the corner. Then she goes back and it pans to her hiding and she's going, yes, yes, yes. And it's like a good meme of like someone sees something bad happening and the fact the attention's not on them. And it's
yeah,
like Martin Luther no, it's John Wycliffe seeing Martin Luther taking all the blame for the Reformation. He's like
yeah.
looking around the corner and seeing everyone hating Martin Luther and wincing, and then he's like, "Yes, thank you,
Well, and Luther was also
thank you."
Luther. Jan
Yeah,
Hus was another big
yeah,
influence on Luther. Jan Hus was who was actually burned at the stake
sure,
was a big
sure,
influence.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean,
yeah,
yeah, I mean,
exactly.
I don't know. Anyhow, much love to the
Look,
Tradcast. But I like to
I mean,
rip them up where I can. So yeah,
Luther did not have like a massive influence in England, and then henceforth not such a massive one in America until
yeah,
obviously
yeah.
lots of German immigrants came to America.
And
But
Scandies, but mostly Germans. Yeah, yeah,
oh yeah, tons of Germans. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
No, they're like the second biggest European
Second biggest.
ethnic
Yeah,
group, aren't they? Yeah,
yeah.
and the Scandies are much lower than that. I
The
mean, there aren't
Scandies
that
are
many
much lower.
Scandies.
Yeah,
There aren't that many Scandies, full stop. But yeah,
and that's true.
exactly.
So final thoughts. This is probably a good time to wrap it up. It's a natural stopping point. I think. Did you like it? I hope you liked it. It seems like you liked it.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Well, it was so nice to read something like this that is obviously so insightful and is also so short. So it's so clever at distilling all this stuff into one place. Obviously, it's not something you should set store by only this as an insight because yeah, it is quite short. But yeah, it's so entertaining and it's so funny and it's so nice to read stuff that makes you laugh whilst also being so insightful. And yeah, I see it as as I've mentioned earlier, it's strange that people like Lewis are not seen as prophetic in that same sort of Orwellian way because there's a lot of stuff in this that's about democracy and
Oh yeah.
systems
You
and
should
and exploitation and stuff.
you should
It's
definitely check
interesting.
out, you and everyone listening should definitely check out the space trilogy. It's not,
Yes.
it's kind of about space, but it's kind of also more about like the 20th century. And it is also incredibly prophetic. Particularly the
Mm,
third one, that hit you strength, is very particularly regarding AI. There's a whole, I
hmm
don't want to spoil too much, but there's a whole AI thing where like Lewis is essentially predicting AI and talking about how bad it could be,
Sure.
which is cool because that's what we're living, which is something we have to deal with right now. So I mean, that's just like read this.
Mm.
Lewis is he was looking ahead. I think he was seeing, he's a noticer. He noticed trends. He's clearly on the spectrum a little bit.
No,
Like every academic is, right?
yeah,
Like we're all a little
yeah.
spectrumy. Just you
So
wouldn't you don't do this stuff if you don't have a great love for something, and to have an obsessive love for something does you're a little strange, right? You're a little different. You're a
yeah,
little not like the rest. And not that everyone should or needs to be that way, but it's people like that can,
well,
if they don't go off the path, if they stay kind of more or
the
less on it, they can see the curvature of the earth, so to speak, a little bit. And they can see where things
mm,
might be tending. And I think that Lewis was definitely one of those people. So
wrong. The Earth is flat. I'm joking.
yeah,
Was the division of labor in society? You know, especially when it comes to thinking as well as the actual division that it takes to, make a pin or something.
right.
Diversity is our strength, but literally.
Yes.
And also on that note, I will also actually say, I do encourage people to read 1984 because a lot of you have not read it, and that's fine. You just don't need to not lie about it,
Yeah.
because
And I
obviously
told the truth on that. So there you
beyond,
go.
yes, no, I mean you're a good person. I mean, imagine
I don't know
you're an
about that.
academic. You're an
Yeah.
academic. If you're in the habit of lying about stuff you'd read, like you'd never have got
You would be
maintained your job,
surprised. You would
Okay,
be
yes,
surprised how
okay.
many academics lie about what they've read. You'd be,
Okay, I take that back. Well,
yeah,
one thing that people do lie about is that they've read 1984, and it's okay to have not read it, but I do encourage people to read it. It's not, it is from it is from a social democrat perspective. So, and there's lots of other writings Orwell did about economics which are extremely poor, extremely poorly understood, and should not be celebrated. But there is a lot of prophetic things in 1984, obviously about the state of various extreme forms of tyranny that existed in the world after the publication, but also just little things that are very prophetic of what happened in the West in later years. For example, the Junior Anti-Sex League is very prophetic of the various uh, radical social liberation movements that existed in the 1970s. And then there's lots of other things, such as the way that media and particularly visual media or music is came to be mass produced in with technological advancements in the 1980s, and also in the social media age with like kind of automated auto censorship, and just
yeah,
the way that like a, a we don't really need like an FBI or a CIA when everyone just has a smartphone and they'll whip it out for anything that takes their fancy. It's
yeah,
there's a lot of prophetic things in there. And then there's a scene where a character called O'Brien is basically torturing the main character Winston, and he's like the book in this universe in the book there is fascism and communism, which are treated as inferior forms of totalitarian dictatorship compared to the system. And I can't remember the specific words, but it's like in fascism they said what you should do. In communism it was well, um in fascism and communism is more about directing, telling you what to do. The party in us, we tell you what is, as in
yeah,
we literally dictate to you what is, not what you should do, just what is. And that is I can understand that now why it would not people should not consider it overrated, because it is obviously a very, I mean, at the time it was obviously a very provocative way of how modern dictatorships can be, and certainly it has been. I mean, I don't know if anywhere's gotten that bad, but it is, yeah, it is. There are lots of little things in it that are worth
Well,
considering. Yes.
And as Screwtape would say, democracies oftentimes can carry out the work of a dictatorship better than a dictatorships in some cases.
Or
So
a democracy. Yes,
a
quote unquote.
democracy, yeah.
A democracy. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course. Yes.
cool. Well, Fred, thanks
Yes.
again for coming on. You want to shout out anything before we finish? Is there anything you want to shout? I mean, you've shouted out 1984, so that's good. Any other shout outs? Anything you're up
Vote,
to, projects, things like that? Doesn't have to be, but I just want to make sure that you have a
vote,
space for that.
vote Trump,
Yeah, for real, for real, for real.
and follow me on Twitter. I don't know which Twitter.
Mischief
I
Anglo, right?
Yes, I don't know if that's the same account I had last time we spoke.
No, it is the same one. You've managed to keep it, and I
It
think it's
is.
because Elon might have changed some of the rules on certain things. I might be wrong, but yeah,
He has changed the rule on some things. Yeah, yeah. No.
yeah,
Yes. So follow me on Twitter and vote Trump
yeah,
and read 1984. It's pretty good. It's not
yeah.
that long either.
I stand by all those things. I will have to read 1984. I need to get on that. I know. It's
Sure.
busy. I'm busy reading like Viking stuff, right? That's more exciting.
No, yes,
Yeah,
yes. No, you've got you've got your it's what you're paid to do. So yes,
yeah,
you can't
yeah,
read for pleasure much, I guess.
yeah. I'll read it. Yeah, I would read Viking stuff for fun. Cool.
Sure,
All
exactly.
right. Well, let's have you back on at some point coming up here.
Sure,
And
man.
yeah, everyone, and whenever this drops, I guess have a very happy. This will come out before Halloween, so have a very happy Halloween. Do something spooky.
Yes, do.
Have a very good All Saints slash All Souls Day. Remember the people who have passed on, and do something I would say that makes you remember important people in your life who've died. And that doesn't have to be sad. It can be also be fun. Do something that just sort of
Yes,
meaningful. Um, and
precisely. Yes.
Guy Fawkes is an asshole and we don't like him. So burn your Guy Fawkes thing. We don't like Catholic saboteurs. And please do vote Trump because holy if you're in America, because holy shit. This action, I mean, everyone says it's the most important election. I mean, it feels pretty consequential. I don't know if that's just fake, but it does feel that way. So
It
yeah,
yeah, it's well, you can't possibly know if it is in your whole lifetime, but it seems like a big deal.
it's kind of a big deal.
Yes. I mean, if it were like a referendum, then maybe on some particular issue, which obviously America doesn't really do, but like
Yeah,
if it was that, you probably more likely say this is so important, but it's a big deal.
it's a big deal. And
This time around, yes.
it's pretty big. So, yeah,
Yes.
I've already voted. So early voting is open in many states in the US. So if you can do
Yes,
that, get on that. Um,
indeed.
yeah, and cool. Well, Fred, thanks so much. And yeah,
Thanks for
everyone, have
having
a great,
me.
yeah, so it's a pleasure as always. Enjoy life over there in jolly old England, and I don't know, eat a crumpet or something for those of us here who are busy dealing with
No,
everything
no,
America has.
no. I'll eat some nice American food. I'll have some good old high fructose corn syrup
Yeah.
soda, and
Seed
I'll
oils. Have some seed oils. It's yeah.
some seed oils. Yes, I'll go and have some seed oils and I'll go and have a McDonald's.
Yeah. A McDonald's. It's just called Donald's right now. So just change that thing.
Donald's.
Yeah, just Donald's. Cool. With that, I'll let everyone go. Thanks, Fred. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day,
Cheers, man.
weekend, whenever. Bye.